Welcome to the Builder Web3 Podcast. Today, my good friend JP. He is the founder and CEO of Mantra. JP, before we get too deep into Mantra, give us a brief background into what you were doing before you got to Web3. What was your come to crypto moment?
Actually, I got into crypto before I really started my career. So I bought Bitcoin back in 2013 when I was in university, but I was studying finance, international business. It was a bit more on like a finance consulting kind of like IB track. Ended up my first job out of school was working at an investment bank in Shanghai, China. But I was doing fintech related research, and I just ended up primarily researching crypto and blockchain at the time. So I've effectively been working my whole career in Web3.
Now, were you born in Shanghai or were you born in the US and then later moved to China?
Born in the States, originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, St. Louis, Missouri, so Midwest, but have lived my pretty much entire adult life outside the States. I was in Madrid, Spain, Brussels, Belgium, Frankfurt, Germany, Shanghai, China, and then Hong Kong most recently.
That's one thing I really like about the crypto industry. It's very international. So you were originally getting into like the investment banking sphere. Talk to us a little bit about like what led you down maybe more the crypto rabbit hole, the crypto founder journey.
Yeah, for sure. So I actually just had a buddy in college who was a computer science major, and he was doing stuff on the dark web and told me I should check out this Bitcoin thing, and looked into it. Really, really hard to buy back then. I was also a poor college student, so I didn't have like tons and tons of disposable income to invest into crypto. But it piqued my interest, and then after graduating college, my undergrad, moved and did a master's in Germany. I kind of started like being more interested in fintech, which was kind of like an early buzzword precursor to the kind of like the ICO heyday. Then when I moved over to Shanghai and was over there, that was like really when crypto in China was popping. So like 2015, 2016, 2017, right before they banned crypto exchanges in 2017. And then that's when I ended up moving down to Hong Kong. So like that's kind of like how it all transpired. I would say I like accidentally became an entrepreneur. It wasn't necessarily intention. But I would say that it's definitely what I was built to do.
Definitely. And if people are interested in crypto in like Hong Kong and Asia specifically, I'd say look at Casey's episode from the GM show or maybe Andy's from X Plus. But let's talk a little bit about Hong Kong in case people haven't listened to those episodes, because it differs quite a bit from mainland China in terms of their crypto adoption. Talk to us a little bit about the state of crypto there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important to understand that like Hong Kong and mainland China are under this thing that's like one country, two systems. So they literally have, technically different currencies, different financial regulators, very different ways and rules of kind of operating anything, pretty much. But as it pertains to crypto, there's one set of rules, you can consider it in Hong Kong or like offshore, and then there's one set onshore. And obviously there's a lot of very stringent rules and regulations as it pertains to kind of like permissionless crypto adoption in mainland China. But in Hong Kong, there's actually a clear set of rules and regulations for at least for like centralized exchange businesses. This has been a hub of crypto for a very, very long time. I mean, basically every single major centralized exchange has come through Hong Kong at some point. So there's a lot of people who've been in Web3 for a very long time. It's not really a crazy densely populated like builder community, but there's a lot of projects. But it's not like certain hotbeds in the U.S. like New York or San Fran or maybe even London in the U.K. Just because it's not like it's a small place and there's only 8 million people who live in all of Hong Kong, and it's primarily a pretty developed economy. So it's a lot of like professional services people, bankers, accountants, lawyers, consultants, etc. It's a lot of like advisory services, and that generally doesn't really like mess with like STEM and computer science and these type of things. So like you have to kind of go elsewhere for dev talent, at least generally speaking. But it still is a great place to live, in my opinion. It's definitely an interesting market for crypto and Web3 adoption. but I think it really just depends like what you're trying to achieve. And for us, Hong Kong is a place where, frankly, we like to live, we like to operate, but it's not like we're targeting Hong Kongers. It's not really our market, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I remember visiting Hong Kong in 2016 and just being absolutely in love with it. I'm like, wow, it's like if New York never got cold, and it's like,
Yeah,
I mean, it's very different, but
yeah,
it has a very similar vibe in my
100%.
thinking. And then let's talk a little bit about Mantra Chain. So, what are you guys trying to accomplish there? What led you to start it?
Um, I think it really you kind of have to understand the story of how we got to Mantra and how we built it up, and it's kind of a little bit the story of my life of trying different things in the space, and having some work, having some not, learning from them, and continually iterating. Um, and just in a nutshell, Mantra itself was kind of founded after we had done an initial tokenization deal in the U.S. back in 2019 with the U.S. broker dealer. So we did a tokenization offering under a Reg D private placement, which was actually literally probably a world's first, where we tokenized a professional basketball player contract named Spencer Dinwiddie. This was in like 2019. Then COVID happened, and honestly, we had to figure something out. And what I mean by that is like I needed to pay the bills. I needed to like do something with my life, and so we ended up starting this DeFi project. Um, and we kind of built out this on-chain smart contract platform, um, which had really nothing to do with tokenization at the time. It was just more like financial, just DeFi, right? Then we saw very quickly like the pitfalls with DeFi. Most people have no idea how to transact and interact on chain. A lot of scams, a lot of rug pulls. We could see like the I guess the regulation enforcement like coming down the pipe. And then we went back and got in touch with our partners in the U.S. and we're like, hey, like we've just built out all this, tech now. Let's, integrate that with this licensing. So we started doing that in the context of the U.S. market. That slowed down pretty significantly after, everything blew up in 2022 and 2023, basically with, Luna, 3AC, FTX, BlockFi, Celsius, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we looked elsewhere, which started to be Dubai, UAE, and international markets, at least as it pertains to Mantra. And we just felt like there was a lack in a robust technical, protocol layer that we could build on that served our purposes, which were specifically geared towards, financial use cases, generally asset tokenization or RWAs, I think is what kind of like everyone calls them now. Um, and compliance focused, AML, KYC required platforms. So we have devised a way that we can kind of take the best of Web3 and permissionless open finance, as well as having these like on-chain permissioned apps, which support asset tokenization. And that's kind of why we built both the chain and the app layer.
And talk to us about this permissioned app layer. Like, what does that mean for the general populace?
Maybe just a qualifying question on my side. Do you mean general populace from like crypto
Like
natives or
crypto,
general pop?
yeah, crypto
Okay,
natives.
okay. Um, so effectively, how we've designed it is that it's a permissionless blockchain, which has both a permissionless and a permissioned layer to it, or area, however you want to kind of describe it. Meaning that on one side, you can like anyone can read and write to the chain, and that's just like your traditional kind of like open, layer one or layer two solution that you'd have in DeFi today. Then we have a permission layer, which would require some degree of onboarding, whether that's with a regulated app or some other kind of intermediary, compliance intermediary. You don't have to do that to interact with the ecosystem, and we anticipate that there'll be a suite of apps on both sides. Actually, there are literally going to be a suite of apps on both sides. Um, this is, meant to effectively create as little friction and as little requirement of you having to do something if you don't choose to, if you don't want to. Um, Obviously, onboarding is a process. A lot of people in crypto, kind of have this idea that they don't want to share information, they don't want to do KYC. But I believe that in general, the average person doesn't mind doing KYC if it gives them access to something that they want. But what they don't like doing is doing it a lot. Um, so in this instance, the idea is that you can kind of come through the permissionless layer, learn more about the ecosystem, and be interacting with, it's a Cosmos SDK chain, so you can interact via IBC with all number of different stuff. Then you can see all the different apps, all the different assets, all the different functionalities within the permission layer. And you can choose if you want to, onboard with one of the providers that, do verified credentials that we're supporting, including one of our own apps. And then you can create a decentralized ID, which can then allow you to onboard to everything else pretty seamlessly without having to continuously do KYC over and over and over again. So that's kind of the idea.
So essentially, like a one-time KYC, and then you can and do what you please in the app.
That's pretty much the idea. Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about, how you guys are. So you were looking in the market, you didn't really see chains that were specifically geared towards RWAs. Talk about how you guys are kind of constructing Mantra to better facilitate that particular use case.
Sure. So I think there's probably two parts to that, and then there's the chain itself, and then there's the app. Because at least in a nutshell, creating a token on chain is not that hard. Even creating a token with different smart contract functions, which is one of the the modules that we've built, isn't that hard. But in combination of having like this passportable ID, a token issuance and management module like we just described, different functions, burn, pause, mint, freeze, seize in certain instances, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So people can issue RWA tokens, seamlessly and easily. Example, like if you get phished and you lose your real estate token, that doesn't mean you're going to get kicked out of your house. You can probably burn that one and get a new one if you can prove that it was invalidly taken. And then a permissioning module that effectively allows the dApp builder to choose and create a customizable governance framework or compliance framework about who can interact with what at what time. And that's all done at the smart contract layer at the chain itself. Sorry, at the protocol layer of the chain. You can have smart contracts on top of it that interact with these modules. So that's one thing that just like is just like a suite. You can call it like almost like a compliance SDK for developers to easily build on. The other part that I think is pretty relevant is the application itself. And one of the issues we've seen with RWAs over time is like there hasn't really been secondary markets for trading these things. There hasn't been any distribution channels. There hasn't really been any ability to have any degree of liquidity for these different types of products. So we think that is critical. So we've been spending a lot of time in getting licensed companies to work with us, as well as getting our own licensing. So in the process of finalizing licensing in Dubai under VARA, which is the regulator out in Dubai, for brokerage, exchange, and investment and asset management. So you can actually start having a legitimate venue to trade these things, to invest in them, to participate in this like tokenized real world asset product suite or asset class. And that's quite important. I say pretty regularly, like you can fork code, but you can't fork a license. And it's taken us a significantly long time. So that becomes this pretty significant defensible moat around the business.
Absolutely. And talk to us like about why it's so difficult. And this is what one of the things I felt like was holding the RWA space back is this compliance layer and this compliance. So talk to us a little bit about the struggles of getting these like compliance documents and what you usually have to go through.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not easy. Obviously the tricky part about the whole thing is, in certain instances it is, country by country, so jurisdictionally specific, asset class by asset class. And there's ways to do it in like kind of rudimentary workarounds where you can tokenize SPVs and stuff like that. But that's really just creating an existing, structure that exists on paper and just, putting a token behind it. It doesn't mean that the legal framework behind it doesn't support, the value transfer on and off chain. But it's kind of not really the real thing. And like real estate's a perfect example of that. Like you can tokenize ownership of a company that owns a building or a house or real estate or land. But you're not actually tokenizing like the title deed of the actual thing. So it's a little bit like faux tokenization was what I call it. So that just becomes really hard, right? Like you're talking about like one jurisdiction where you have to interact with the regulator or the government to then figure out like how this particular asset class would change the legal framework that's currently in existence into like a digital tokenized form. That's a hard thing. Another thing is like, when we were going through this process in Dubai, they were setting up a framework which is quite progressive comparatively to like most of the regulators that we've seen globally. But it was still meant from like a centralized exchange and a centralized intermediary perspective. So we had to do a lot of education about like how do these smart contracts work? What does it mean if it's self-custodial? Like how does it, is it going to be a problem if my assets get taken? How does the travel impact this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then just from a like logistical operational perspective, I mean, we had to spend over 2 years working on this. They require 2 years of a financial audit of financial history, which is a very hard thing for most crypto companies to do. I mean, to even get an audit would be a hard thing, or get an auditor to work with you is a hard enough thing, let alone to actually complete it 2 years in a row. It's like all these are challenges which make it very, very difficult to actually, you know, enable these things. Um, but it is happening, and that's the good thing. It is definitely happening, and we'll see it happen more and more. And I think I'm pretty excited about the opportunity set just because you can see people are definitely trying it, and it's still pretty blue ocean in my opinion. But the mind share is really starting to get there. Regulators definitely care about this stuff, and they want to see it happen. Institutions are talking about it like regularly, and I think now retail is also a little bit more interested in it. Even though I think we still need to kind of test out different asset classes, different products, and make sure that they have fit for today's market, which today's market, in my opinion, is still, crypto natives who are, used to interacting on chain versus like eventually where I see this headed, which will basically be everything will be in the palm of your hand on a mobile device, just like it is on Robinhood, but it's all asset classes under the sun, real estate, funds, you name it, and it's on obviously Web3 rails. It's on a blockchain. You just don't necessarily know that it's on a blockchain. So that's like down the line, like mass market kind of thing. But that's going to take definitely a lot of time.
Absolutely. And let's talk a little bit about the current adoption. Like, what's the state of Mantra? And talk to us about like the vertical of Builder that is on Mantra currently.
Yeah, great question. We're seeing a pretty significant uptake on a few different levels, and we both have to kind of operate on the Web3 native side, which is like, Web3 dApp builders, just like any normal DeFi ecosystem or layer one ecosystem, right? Obviously, ours is specifically looking at, you know, primarily financial use cases, but that doesn't mean there can't be things like interesting, memes and culture related things or even gaming things that have some, maybe yield back by real world assets. So there's a number of different verticals, even though it's not necessarily only financial or DeFi. Um, and we're seeing them from all over the world. Yeah, we have teams that are building from Southeast Asia, from Africa, from Europe. Not as many from the US yet, but that's I think a little bit just due to regulatory, constraints and how you can issue tokens and whatnot there. But that's okay. Um, and then you also have to take the asset originator side, which is more like the actual where do you get these RWA deals from? And so far, a lot of the interest that we're seeing is coming from the Middle East and Asia. Obviously we have strong connection. I mean, I'm in between Hong Kong and Dubai primarily. A lot of our team is in Dubai. We have very strong connections in the UAE, and we're seeing a lot of the deals that we're doing being done with asset originators from the UAE market across, real estate, fund tokenization, so like money markets, private credit, private equity, et cetera, VC, et cetera. And then another one that I think is another interesting vertical we're exploring is more like anything that has a significant emotional draw for retail. That could be fan tokens, but fan tokens that are not just like change the color of the player's socks kind of fan tokens, like actual fan tokens where you have ownership in something and it gives you economic value, um, or music, or anything that's a little bit more entertaining, I guess. So we're looking at those three, and so far I think that's heavily dominated by Middle East and Asia. Although there's people from all over the world that are interested in this stuff, but there's like I said, back to your question, like this is asset by asset class, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, and you got to be able to know how you can issue the token, who you can sell it to, where it can trade, and these are all pretty complicated questions to answer.
Absolutely. And let's talk a little bit because you mentioned this earlier about building on Cosmos. So talk to us a little bit about that decision on why to build there and what that's
Sure.
enabled you guys to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So we, when we first launched Mantra, actually we're running validator infra for like 20 or 30 different proof of stake chains back in 2020 and 2021. So we got familiar with a lot of the early Cosmos Tendermint chains, and a lot of the early kind of onset of POS chains in general. Um, and we're exploring when we wanted to build our own chain, like, did we want to have a layer two? Did we want to have our own layer one? We felt it was quite important for us to have our own sovereign layer one, where we could actually own our validator set, our end all be all validator set. Not own it in the literal sense, but own it in the sense that we have, the ability to permission who gets access to it, and know who they are basically. Um, and rather just have this like idea of sovereignty over the validator. So that was quite important. I think more philosophically, like building on an ecosystem where a project within the ecosystem can technically be bigger than the technological stack that it is associated with, aka Atom, is quite important because like if you're building on ARB, you're building on Optimism. The layer two is, I guess it's a layer three in this instance, like never going to be bigger than Optimism or Arbitrum in that instance, in my opinion, right? It's going to be very hard for your chain to be bigger than the actual, tech stack it's built on. Whereas in the instance of Cosmos, that's just not the case. I mean, Terra was a Cosmos chain. Chronos chain, which is Crypto.com, is a Cosmos chain. Celestia was a Cosmos chain. All these have been, Fetch AI is Cosmos chain. All these things have been bigger than Atom itself. Atom is obviously not a perfect representation of Cosmos ecosystem. But that's how like generally people view it. And I think the third piece um, is just tech, like pure, technical infrastructure. I think Cosmos has some of the best tech out there. Um, they're, you know, IBC protocol for bridging, which I think is, an amazing bridging protocol. Um, you have, a very strong kind of like core base that you can build off, and you can, have all these different teams within the ecosystem that are effectively contributing to open source code that you can use, you can reutilize, you can, contribute back, and you have people who are solving problems that you might not directly be solving, but it's like, okay, that's a cool function. We can use that. Like this, module that we forked from Osmosis is like be able to pay with, any gas token, right? And not that we're going to have every single gas token on the sun, but in my opinion, if you're on a very cheap, low cost, scalable chain, the gas is effectively irrelevant from a value accrual perspective. Because, I mean, it's pennies on the pennies on the dollar for every transaction. It's not like you know like Ethereum back in the day when you have 10, 15, $20 transactions kind of thing. And if it's just better or easier for someone to pay in USDC for particularly for newer people because they have that in the wallet, why not? That's a better user experience. So it allows you to be specific on what you want to build, allows you to focus on your use case, and in my opinion, it just gives us a lot of significant upside potential, with the ability to just kind of focus on what we do best.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's quite funny. IBC was one of the main things that have been mentioned by most of the Cosmos builders that we talk with, and then even from this company, Manta, they like
Hmm.
expanded IBC to connect to Solana and Ethereum. So people are very bullish on that. Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges you guys faced in building Mantra and how you guys have kind of worked to overcome them. Because one of our goals is to get more builders in the space. So you talked about the
Oh.
regulatory hurdles. Are there any? What other things did you guys kind of encounter?
Um, I think it's a little bit of this, shiny new object narrative that the space has so much issue with. Mantra is 4 years old. Like we literally celebrated our fourth birthday, like a week ago, basically. And, that means that we aren't like the newest thing on the block, um, which sometimes is a little challenging because it does mean you need to have a lot of conviction and kind of like just focus on doing what you think is the right way forward, and not getting distracted when you have, something that's like pumping like crazy right next to you that hasn't delivered anything at all. Um, Not saying that there couldn't be some value there, but like it's just purely narrative, purely speculation. But so that like that is just a generally hard thing, and you have this like attention, um, you know, like guess it's like this attention suck that it's very hard to get people to, pay attention to you. I think one good thing is, we've been able to position ourselves with our good timing, with good execution as one of the leaders in RWA, up there with Ondo and, I mean, pretty much Ondo and Mantra are like the two biggest RWA, like node for RWA projects right now. Um, so because of that, we've kind of come out to the leader of the pack, I would say to a degree. That's been super helpful because if you're not there for a new narrative, it's very hard to come back up, right? Um, so a lot of challenges just from like that. And I think the other thing is like I'm American, like I said earlier, but we are based in Hong Kong, and I think when we were initially raising some money last year, particularly like people in Hong Kong, I was just like the foreigner. I didn't go to Harvard. I didn't, have this like crazy, like Ivy League pedigree or whatever. And so they weren't giving me any money. And then, people in the US were like, well, okay, you're in freaking Hong Kong. Like, we don't, maybe you're not as legit as someone who's here. So like finding my, I guess, ability to kind of like build the business was a challenge. And then, this year it's been a tremendous, support. We've had a bunch of different, very strong institutional investors come in. And I think it's unlocked that like initial, just like cold start. Um, so yeah, I mean, very fortunate about how this year's gone for us, but has not been easy over the last four, I'll tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned some of the institutional investors and like partnerships. Talk to us a little bit about like collaborations and partnerships you guys have formed.
For sure. So we did raise some money earlier this year. Two of the bigger investors or more notable ones are Sharuk Partners, which is a UAE-based fintech VC primarily. We're the first crypto deal that they've led. But they're backed by 9 sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East and Asia, so super, super institutional capital there. They've been really helpful in kind of like facilitating this real world, credibility that's needed when you're a real world asset project. Another one is Laser Digital, which is like the crypto arm of Nomura, which is a big Japanese investment bank. So they're one of our investors and strongest partners. We've also done deals and announced partnerships with Zan Bank, which is a UAE digital bank backed by Franklin Templeton and the Abu Dhabi royal family. We've announced a very large $500 million real estate tokenization deal with a Dubai-based real estate developer called MAG. Another one for aviation financing, tokenizing a Boeing 787 plane, which is pretty cool with a company called Novus Aviation Capital. So we have a number of different kind of like cool initiatives that we've done. Also, we've collaborated with Ondo, more on the like Web3 kind of crypto side. So we're one of the chains that USDY will be launched on, and you can actually get tokenized treasuries on chain from Ondo and Mantra collaboration. So we've been pretty busy, and fortunately some of the best partnerships are still ahead. We haven't, we're in the lead up to mainnet, which is coming pretty soon. We're saving the best for the rest of this year, I'll tell you that.
Very exciting. So, on that note, tell us some of the exciting milestones and developments that people can look forward to, even if you can't say specifically. Just give us a rough time frame.
Yeah, for sure. So right now the core focus is like mainnet launch, and what the public statement is on that is after the summer. So we're almost at the end of the summer, and before the U.S. election, which is on November 5th. So somewhere in that window of now and November 5th, we'll be launching mainnet. I can say that we'll be announcing more specifics behind that at Token 2049 Dubai. Singapore, which is coming up in about a month. I'm not sure if you're going to be there, but if you are, let me know. And aside from that, we do have some pretty large major partnerships across new RWA kind of asset classes, as well as even bigger ones from existing ones. We also have a very, very large kind of like Web2 giant partnership that we're very, very excited about. So there's some pretty fun stuff. Yeah, pretty fun stuff.
Well, tell us where people can learn more about Mantra online, where they can talk with you specifically, and who should reach out. Like who do you really want to interact with?
Sure. I mean, I think just to take the last question first, everyone should read. I mean, honestly, if you just want to learn more about anything with the RWAs, Mantra, like you want to collaborate with us, you want to whatever. I'm like super accessible on Telegram, primarily on Telegram and on X. So interact with me on the comments because I don't see all the DMs all the time because there's just too many. But Telegram, fairly active. You can find me pretty quickly. X, definitely interact. And, honestly, if you're a supporter, if you're a token holder for a long time, like if you want to build, if you want to learn more about RWAs, if you want to learn more about Mantra, just anyone can reach out. So I think that's a pretty much anyone kind of thing. Because I like it. I like engaging with the community. And then if you want to learn more, I think the best places are definitely, I mean, we do have a pretty robust kind of like educational content suite on the website, www.mantrachain.io. Social media, particularly on X, very, very active. Telegram, very, very active. If you're a developer, Discord, very, very active as well. So pretty robust community across those major social channels. Do a lot of video content. I do like community AMAs every month. Um, yeah, so those are probably the main places you can learn. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop someone.
Awesome. Well, Jay, thanks so much for coming on the Building Web3 podcast. Everyone can shout out the social media tags and the website itself.
So social media would be at Mantra Chain. Actually, yeah, let me get that right. That's right. At Mantra Chain. Actually, let me just make sure I'm going to get it right. Um, let's see. Mine is JP underscore Mullen, MULLIN 888. And the public community one is, at Mantra underscore chain. Mantra underscore chain on X. That's probably the best place. Telegram, just look up Mantra official, I believe. And then on website, www.mantrachain.io.
Awesome. Well, everyone go interact with JP, go interact with Mantra, and if you'll be at Token 2049, go seek out JP. Well, to all the builders in Web3, let's get back to building the future of tech.